Google Plus crowd. We're kind of growing on Google Plus, so this is good. So if you ever have to miss, we are streaming them live every single time. So please feel free to look at that. The second thing I wanted to do is make sure that you understand we're going to have our next meeting the second week of August as planned, and we may have more city stuff. So hopefully we won't lose you with 2 city things in a row, but it'll be very exciting. And today I would like to introduce you to our 2 guests. One of them you would, if you come here often, you probably know. Jeff is sitting next here beside me, and his Twitter handle, which will come back up in a minute, this loops around, is file_Jeff, and Jeff with the Jeff. So you can use that. And then Frank is on his left. Hey, Frank Bacchio, he works for the city, and he is, you're going to do HoustonTexas.gov. Is that right? Oh, Houston TX. And then the word spelled out DOTGOV. And of course, our hashtag is SMBHOU. So we always have a pretty good Twitter showing. We often trend in Houston whenever we're all meeting. So I'm excited to have all of you amazing people here that can do that. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to tell you kind of why we came around to this topic. We're going to be talking about really harnessing the power of collaborative events. And it's a little bit off the track of social media, but not. We're not going to be talking about using social media per se, although social media is a huge part of collaborative events and how they work. But what we do want to talk about today is the idea of making events work for you. And I'm going to talk to Jeff because he's done a lot of these events here in Houston. They call them hackathons. You don't have to call it a hackathon. That's why we use collaborative event in the title. I've done a lot of national collaborative events that we did not call hackathons, where we got a lot accomplished. So I'd like at the end of this for you to walk away kind of having an idea in your mind like where you fit in this collaborative event ecosystem. So with his company, January Advisors, he does work with the city of Houston to do a lot of these types of collaborative events, but also with other organizations he's worked with. They just recently did one on literacy here in Houston with a nonprofit organization. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach this collaborative event idea. And then Frank, he's here because he actually has been really one of the forerunners in the city for these collaborative events. He uses them, he's come up with products, he's actually put some of these products into use, and they're doing a few more coming up. So he's really, I would call, a mover and shaker in that way. And he's also attended just lots of collaborative events. So he can give that perspective as well as from the user's point of view, like, you know, why would I go to a collaborative event as an individual? So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So I'm going to start off with a fairly simple question, which is, I can find it, put my questions on underneath. What is a collaborative event? And I'm going to give that to you, Jeff. It's a softball.
All right. Thanks. Well, how many of you have been to a hackathon or are familiar with what a hackathon is? Maybe about half. Good amount. Okay. For those of you who haven't been, it's a gathering of usually software developers, sometimes designers, marketers, PR people, social media people, project managers, you name it. A gathering of people who work in technology to work over a period of time, whether it's 6 hours or 24 hours, on a project of interest to them. Sometimes they're competitive events, sometimes they're friendly events. Either way, it's a really good illustration of what's possible when you put a bunch of smart people in a room together.
So that being on that side, I also wanted to ask a question, why are they important? And I'm going to ask Frank that question because I think since you've invested in them so heavily, you might have a good answer for that. Why are hackathons, collaborative events important?
Sure. So I think I have 2 perspectives to share from you. One's as a citizen, as someone that's interested, and the other as someone who's part of an organization that's benefiting from it. And it's really 2 hats or 2 dichotomies for me because I share both of those insights. So from the citizen perspective, I live in Houston, just like many of you do, and the organizations that I've attended these collaborative events for have been to benefit organizations and that are in Houston. And so in that aspect, I'm interested in my community. I'm interested in seeing benefits that also benefit the large community as a whole, as well as myself. I pay taxes here, so I'm interested in seeing those benefits. I'm interested in seeing benefits that help my neighbors, right? And I'm also intellectually curious. So these are events and activities that allow me to interact with people that have a different insight or a different outlook than I do. They also allow me to learn skills or learn about a certain new product or new happening that I wouldn't necessarily know about. So it's a lot of those things, the same reasons why we use social network, right? To learn and to meet other people. From the other dichotomy, as someone inside an organization that's doing one of these events, there really are a couple strong benefits for us. One is particularly with an organization like the City of Houston, we have over 20,000 employees. So it's very easy to fall into a cluster of employees or a division or a department and not have much interaction with other people outside of that division or department. So there's a very big risk of groupthink. And there's not much incentive or there's an inertia that causes us not to necessarily reach across organizational lines. And we have a saying sort of in 611 Walker, which is the building downtown that I walk in, work in. It's a 24-story building that we're sort of in the ivory tower of the city. And so there's this potential for being in this ivory tower, not understanding what your citizens and what your customers want. And so that's one of the big benefits from an organization perspective. You're able to interact directly with your customers. Granted, you guys are selective bias, right? The people that would attend these events are a little bit intellectually curious, like I would be. But you get to meet people from different walks of life than you traditionally would during your normal workday. I think the second major benefit is you're also meeting people that work with different standards or different environments than you do. So I work with one set of standards and one set of processes and procedures. You work in an environment that is completely different. And so maybe I can learn from your processes and procedures and your approach to how to solve a problem. And I think the third is you can actually sit down and start talking about problems that your organization is facing and really start to actually solve those problems. I'm not going to say that these collaborative events are a panacea for massive problems that face an organization, foundational issues, but they'll get you on a road that gets you towards a solution that you can actually implement. And so that's really been a good victory for us over the last 2 years that we've been doing these events. We've had some really solid products and really solid deliverables that we've been able to act on. We've had others that have fleshed out that we've been able to take further down the road with a couple months of extra work. And then there's some where it's just been curious. It's been, these are interesting ways to look at it. Maybe not something that we want to pursue, but we really appreciate that insight. So those three big benefits are there. It's you avoid groupthink, you get to meet with people that have different processes, procedures, and approaches, and you also get good, solid products or items, deliverables that you can walk away with.
So what should be the focus of a hackathon, Jeff? I mean, is it like a place for a nonprofit to come get like their website built, something like that?
No. It's funny. I just wrote a blog about this last week. After the first Houston Hackathon, where Frank was a co-organizer along with Bruce Haupt, who's now in China, and other folks in the finance department, we took a lot of meetings with various organizations who basically came in and said, "Oh, that's awesome! You did a hackathon. We need a new website. Can you do a hackathon for us and build it for free?" And that's not only like, I mean, it's laughable, but it's also a little offensive because you're taking time out of your day to talk to somebody and they don't even understand what a hackathon is. And so I think that it's very good for nonprofits. It's very good for organizations that have a mission or mission-driven. And when you connect with that mission, rather than trying to promote your own individual brand, you're able to attract people who are motivated by that mission rather than are motivated by a brand. So for example, if the Houston Independent School District were to have a hackathon, they should focus on educational issues rather than come support this local high school. And you'll start to attract very skilled people in that particular arena that care about education.
That's a great answer. So because you have done a few of these, can you kind of give us a list of things that are the most important elements of to make a hackathon successful?
Sure. Well, I think reaching out to good people is really important because the success of a hackathon depends on how creative and inspiring and awesome the attendees are. Everything else is just window dressing. I think it's really important to curate some really interesting projects and prompts Not that anybody would have to work on the things that you list, but if you do some preliminary research into your cause or into the city, and hopefully Frank will talk about some of the ways that he selects his projects, you can predict what's going to be really useful. And so when we did the hackathon for the Houston Center for Literacy, we went through and we said, well, a lot of people don't know about the literacy problem in Houston. I mean, we were just getting educated on it. So we went to the Barbara Bush Foundation strategic plan for a vision for literacy over the next decade. And they said, well, it would be great if we had a young professionals organization. It would be great if we had more data-driven decision making and had more resources planned. And all of these things that suddenly you could start to pick off little bite-sized chunks and say, well, a good hackathon project would be a strategy for a young professionals organization. So I think curating good projects is really important. I'm not a huge fan of the competitive hackathon. Salesforce had a hackathon where they had $1 million prize and it got them into a lot of hot water. I really like hackathons that are motivated by something greater than the prize. So.
I guess it works for rockets, but not and science. So what can participants expect when they attend one of these hackathons? I mean, like, do you show up and it's sort of like, I don't know, unstructured, everybody's wandering around? Is that a little bit how it is?
Sounds like a bus station. It is a little unstructured for most of the hackathon. First of all, a good hackathon will have somebody greeting you at the door. They will help you get acquainted. If you don't have a team, they'll help you find a team. If you do have a team, they'll help you get set up. So there's almost like a concierge service that happens at most of these events. But you can have any skill level you want in technology, in media. There's a role for everybody. I'm assuming we'll talk about that shortly. But yeah, I think that even if you've never been to a hackathon before, there's no reason to be fearful. At the Literacy Hackathon, we had a couple of HISD librarians who showed up, and they said, we've never done this before. We don't know what to expect. We're afraid that we're gonna mess it up. It's like, you can't mess this up. There should be no fear of failure. This is like bowling with the little alleys up.
And you've already talked about this just a little bit, Frank, but I want to just talk about the 3 different groups of people that benefit from hackathons or collaborative events. We talked about individuals, organizations, and companies. And the one we haven't talked about really yet a lot is companies. But you did say for organizations like Houston. Could you talk about like just one idea that you really benefited from through these hackathons that maybe you've implemented already? Could you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So we've implemented 2 projects now. We're getting ready to implement another, hopefully 1 to 2 in the next couple weeks or months. And I think we'll try to continue at that pace over the next year or 2, and maybe even accelerate. And so from the company perspective, there are some benefits if you're taking part in one of these things. And what we've seen is we've had some good ideas from companies that are just looking to come to a hackathon and test their skills. They're basically learning how to develop an application or trying a new application that's out of their norm. It's good publicity for them. They're actually able to be in the social media sphere while this event is trending. They're also able to, like I said, test their skills, but they're also getting in front of the potential client. So they're saying, hey, here's potentially something we can offer you. And so we've had that happen a couple times where basically a company has worked on a new product at a hackathon, and they said, this is something that we would like to take further. It's a pilot effort. It's something that potentially the city or another organization could use. And if that organization that's hosting the hackathon is interested, they can further engage with that organization or that company to move that product forward. For us in particular, with the City of Houston, the 2 products that we've implemented haven't so much been from companies as so much as from citizens who have expressed a need, or from council members who have expressed a need in an information source. So our first product that we launched, it didn't necessarily win the first hackathon, but it got a lot of attention, was the one that I had built, Budget Bootcamp. And so a lot of our council members and several citizens, we were just going through the annual operating budget process. And a lot of citizens were asking a lot of questions at the first hackathon because it was in the news. Hey, what is in your operating budget? What are your assets? What are your liabilities? well, assets and liabilities don't actually appear in your annual operating budget. But we're going to go ahead and come up with a way to better visualize the budget and tell you what's going on with it. So that was our first really implemented hackathon project. It's actually still available online. We update it every year. Performance.houstontx.gov, and then if you look for the budget bootcamp link on the left side, you'll find it. The second project that we implemented was from a challenge that we had in concert with another organization that was having a conference. It was the 301 Data Challenge. And several citizens and companies, for that matter, who had called 311 were saying, hey, we don't know what's going on in our area. We call 311, we file a ticket, but we don't necessarily know if it was received. We don't necessarily know if it's opened or closed. We don't know what status is filed under. So we basically have a lot of different visualizations online that we update each month that shows the count of tickets we're receiving, a map of where we're receiving them from. You could search a street and see all the different tickets that are there and the volume that are there. So that's really where we're going at this point. It's more information sharing, and may it be a company or may it be an individual that helps us do that. It works great either way, and the city has benefited from it, and I think those that have participated in the projects have benefited from it as well, and they've definitely learned more about their community.
That's great. So it kind of gives an idea right away how these kinds of things can benefit both the company and the organization. Also, we talked a little bit about open government, which sounds like that's what's kind of driving some of these programs for at least the city of Houston. So I'm going to take a little sidebar with that. Jeff, you started that conversation. Could you, because you're kind of you're in the middle of that completely.
Well, a lot of this comes down to the amount of data that you have available. And the city of Houston is working very hard to make more data sets that are non-critical, that are non-sensitive, available to the public so that we can do things with it. So for example, recently, how many of you read the article recently about the funky smelling water in Houston? Yeah, pretty much everybody saw it. If you read it in the Chronicle, who broke this story, at the very top of the Chronicle, they have a map. And they plotted all the water complaints through 311 that Frank had worked very hard to visualize. And they took that same data and they plotted it on a map to show you where these complaints happen. And so in my mind, that also raises new questions about, what does that data mean? But it's data-driven journalism. It's taking our media to that next level of investigative, I don't know. I just think it's really cool. So there's this ability to report on the government, to be more accountable for what's happening. And there's also this ability for the government to take steps towards transparency, proactive steps. So if you want data right now that's in the public realm, you have to know it exists and you have to request it, and it has to go through processes. If there's an open data policy enacted, then the city is going to take those steps to release those data sets in advance so that you don't necessarily have to predict what's available and then ask for it. And so as we go down that road, in the coming years, I'm certain that Houston, along with many, many other cities, are going to take these steps towards more transparency and accountability, and that benefits our technology community as well. From a startup perspective, because I have a soft spot for startups, the civic technology market represents 141 billion? Is that right? No, can't be right. $141 million a year in spending. I think it's actually $141 billion. So there's this enormous untapped market for using these data sets and building interesting applications on top of it. So I really think we're at the beginning of a new generation of technology.
And so it's interesting that Jeff talks about that funky water story. It showed up on my RSS news feed, and I work for the finance department, and we've been working on this whole idea of civic innovation, open data with other departments for the last year and a half. So I'd say the program is still in its infancy. And the 311 data source is one of the few that we have that is auto-refreshing. So it refreshes every night, and so anyone can go out there and see, here are all the tickets that came in that day, here's their status, here's what their type is, all this other type of stuff. And so seeing that story, I wasn't sure at first if they had gotten the data from the open data source. And so I'd gone out for a run and I'd come back and I'm like, you know what, let me actually look at the map and see where it's coming from. And sure enough, it was coming from our open data source. And so rather than filing a Texas Public Information Act request, they were able to go out on their own and get this data themselves. And so from us that have been working on this open data initiative, this was really a victory. It's something that shows that we are making a difference, that citizens and these middlemen that help convey information to citizens are using the data that we're putting out there, and they are being able to benefit from it. So it is a victory for us, and also help lighten the workload, because otherwise, maybe a citizen would have tipped the Chronicle off to this. The Chronicle would have had to file a public information request. We would have had to done a whole bunch of work to actually fulfill it. And so for us, they were able to do their research and then come to the city and ask questions about it. And so that's really a good victory for us, I would say.
I think for a finance department, saving time and money is probably a victory indeed. So the other thing I was going to say is all these open data sources, some people here work for companies that have proprietary data sources. And maybe how does a hackathon like this work for a company, like if they can't really share like publicly all their data? Can you explain that, like an internal kind of hackathon?
I mean, everybody does hackathons differently. There's no real rules to it. You can kind of make it up as you go along. That's what we do, at least, and we try to make it fun. But there are companies that do it using their platforms or their APIs. We did a hackathon with Microsoft. It wasn't required that we use Microsoft tools, but oftentimes companies will sponsor that to help promote their platforms. There was a hackathon for. Do y'all know the app Yo?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there was a Yo hackathon, and it was so cool. They're using it for disaster response. They're using it for all sorts of things. Ben Lopez was telling me all about it the other day, and it's really cool. You take this concept at its core of putting smart people together in a room, feasting on a problem for a period of time, and awesome things happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be about open government, although that seems to be something that is very relevant to all the citizens in Houston.
Yeah. That's great. And so, I mean, we call it a hackathon, and I think sometimes we think, oh, like a bunch of developers holed up in a room. So, like, what does that have? I mean, how many in here do, like, what you'd consider marketing and PR? Yeah. How many are, like, kind of in the more technology side of things, developer? Yeah, okay. So not many people probably see themselves in this. There's others here from different disciplines. So can you explain how different disciplines than just like these technical disciplines can really participate in these programs?
Sure. Well, since I'm speaking to an audience of communicators, as one communicator to another, I think that your role in hackathons is essential, absolutely essential. Technology people are going to sit there and they're going to work. They're going to plan, they're going to work. They don't have somebody to tell their story. And at any given hackathon, you might have 100 people. You might have 10, 15 different teams. That's 10 or 15 different awesome stories. Why did they choose this project? How are they going along with it? How are they scoping it? How are they pivoting? What was their presentation like? It's an enormous amount of information to convey. And being able to capture it in real time with social media tools, and then being able to provide a recap and make it happen on the internet. Because if it's not on the internet, it didn't happen in real life. Without that, your role is absolutely essential. And so if you look at yourself as a citizen journalist at these events, then you have a really pivotal role to play.
So along that line, I mean, so if you have 10 teams working on 10 projects, you really need like 10 reporters. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it wouldn't hurt. You definitely need to be fast on your feet, but it helps to have multiple people taking pictures. It helps to have multiple people capturing stories. We had so many outcomes of the last Houston hackathon that Frank and Nikki and a lot of people here helped co-organize. There were people putting up boards with a picture, just a random picture saying, what would you like this to be? There were all these forms of civic engagement. There were kids going around taking surveys of all the different projects and understanding who was working on them. There's just a lot going on, and it's this mess of engagement that's really, really interesting.
I think there's a flip side to that as well, too. As people that are in PR and social media and marketing, you have a different perspective. I'm an analyst. I'm not a technology person. And so I think very linearly. Maybe many of you don't. And so if there's a project that catches your eyes at one of these collaborative events, don't be afraid to get part of the project team as well, because you'll be able to provide a different insight, a different way of viewing the product than other people that are involved will. And you may be more like someone that's actually going to use the product than an engineer or a business analyst will be. And so you'll be able to tell us how to better design the product, how to better communicate out those ideas. than we would ever know how to. So that's really a major benefit that you provide if you want to get involved in a team as well.
That's a really great point. That sometimes I've been in events where people say, "Well, I don't really know what I have to offer. I'm no expert." But being an expert is sometimes the best thing, or not being an expert is sometimes the best thing, because the experts sometimes live in their ivory towers and they don't know what they don't know. So if they hear some interesting perspective and feedback, they may be like, "Oh, people won't understand that. Let's see how we can pull that together." Could you talk a little bit about different types of hackathons, maybe like the write-a-thon, and just kind of talk about other ones that you've done that aren't technology really?
Sure. Absolutely. So in February, we did the City of Houston write-a-thon, which was co-organized by some other folks here, like Amy Woodall and some other marketing people. It was awesome. It was really great. We had over 100 people show up to the Houston Public Library here in Montrose working on communications projects for the City of Houston. The city desperately needs more savvy marketing people like Melissa. And I'm just going to name everybody here today. But the city desperately needs more savvy marketing people. And there's a strong representation of city people here today. There was a strong representation of city people at the write-a-thon coming with projects to work side by side with you. Some of the outcomes of that were the planning of the SLGT app, which was then built at the City of Houston Hackathon and ranked and is going to present to the mayor soon. There were a number of different marketing campaigns that were seen as exercises for how to communicate things like healthy pets, healthy streets. There was some rewriting of the city's websites and explaining what things are. There were some translations of ordinances and policies that would make it easier to understand how to do business in the city. And there was some kind of exploration of the Hire Houston First initiative for all the entrepreneurs here. Doing business with the city gives you a scoring preference in procurement if you're a Houston-based vendor. But a lot of people don't know that, and it's difficult to kind of find that out unless you know where to look. So there was some exploration of how do you get that in the hands of small businesses.
I guess whenever you guys had the projects up, I wasn't able to come because, kids. But I think we had swimming lessons or something I had to go to. Anyway, much more fun to rewrite parking signs. I thought that was amazing. Yeah. I don't know if anybody took that on, but maybe I'll do that next time. So anyway, there's other ways you could do this. And I think what's interesting about this concept is that you can get a group of people together across either departments, if you are a big company, or across disciplines and solve interesting problems together and then learn about each other. I find that really interesting in general. So tell us some of the other unintended outcomes you've seen before from some of these people. Do you know of people getting jobs? Do you know of people moving to a different field? I mean, could you just talk about some of the, I'm sure, unintended consequences you've seen over the years?
Sure. I'm sure you have some too.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen people get recruited. I've seen people start companies. I've seen people test out ideas. But really, the unintended consequences are the relationships that are developed between people in the city and the community. When I first started working with Bruce Haupt in the finance department over 2 years ago now, I noticed from all the folks who worked for the city that I'd meet, there was a little bit of reticence to engage with the community. They were open, but oftentimes people will come to you and complain about your property taxes. It's like that's not even a city thing. So I think this is a really positive way to facilitate civic engagement. And people come with ideas in hand. They want to change Houston. And it's inspiring, I think. I can't speak from the city side. It's inspiring as a citizen to watch so many people from the city take an interest in this kind of technology.
So beyond the products, I think there's really two major benefits that we've wanted to try to gain from this, excluding the open data side of things. One, I think people seem to view governments as these monolithic organizations, right? As they're lockstep, everyone knows each other, all marching on the same path. And that's simply not the case. I've shared my theory with government, with some people in the city, during our Lean Six Sigma trainings. That's another thing that we do. And it's this idea of the city as a whole, as a community, grew really fast for the last 3 decades. And as a strong mayor form of government, people think, hey, the mayor tells the entire city what to do. was simply not necessarily the case because the city grew so fast and we didn't have the organizational structure in place to maintain that direct line of sight from the mayor down through all the line staff. And so what has happened over the last 3 decades is we have departments that are largely fiefdoms to their own. And so even inside departments, you have divisions that don't interact with other divisions. And so one of the big benefits for us, and I think it's still something that we want to drive further, is when we have city employees attend these events, they're interacting with other city employees from other divisions inside their own department, or even other divisions from other departments that they would have never interacted with on a regular basis at all. And so that is a huge benefit. I don't think it can be understated. And I think a lot of the large organizations here in the city face a lot of the same challenges. May it be Shell, may it be Exxon, may it be KBR. It's anything where you grow past 100 or 200 people, you begin to face these organizational challenges. I think the second big benefit for us, again, beyond the open data perspective, has been that, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is this idea of standards, particularly in the IT side. We have a set of standards, technology standards, that we use day in and day out. In some areas of the city, those standards are older than me. We have, I kid you not, servers that are older than me using languages that are older than me. It's not necessarily bad, but it's just you don't innovate from that. And so when you come to these types of collaborative events, you're meeting people that are using different standards, that are using different technologies, and that are using different processes. And so you're able to do some of that on-site learning without actually having to do it on-site. You're doing it at an event. And so that's really huge for us. From a social media perspective, maybe it's like learning how to use a different social media network. Instead of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, there's some other new thing that comes about. And if it's not something that you're actively going out and looking at, you wouldn't know about it. And so it's the same thing for us. There's new languages, there's new technologies, there's new approaches. And I really want to see, as we move forward, more of our IT staff involved in these type of events and collaborative efforts. So they're not only getting the idea of what the customer wants, but they're also getting an idea of what the new technologies are that are out there. What are the new approaches that we have? So we're not stuck in technologies that are 10 to 20 years old.
So I'm going to apologize because I didn't tell you I was going to ask this. I always do that. But how much does something like this cost to produce? And kind of give me an idea of what you need from a a more practical point of view.
Well, it depends how much it costs to produce, just like anything. From a strict costs perspective, it depends on how many people show up. Food is probably your most variable cost. So if you have 100 people, that's a lot more expensive than 20 people. The length is another variable cost. So if it's a 4-hour event versus a 24-hour event, that's 1 meal versus 4 meals. So you can do the math. Venue is also a challenge, but we're very fortunate here in Houston that the Houston Technology Center donates the venue every year. And for our other hackathons, we have a good relationship with the Houston Public Library, which has some phenomenal workspaces. So we've held the Literacy Hackathon there, at the Central Library, and the Write-a-thon at the Montrose Library. So I think the trick is finding the right venue with the right bandwidth and internet for it. And the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. I think the costs to produce it are pretty easy to figure out. What's hard to determine is how much time it takes to really understand the issue, to get inside those issues and figure out how to communicate them appropriately to people who don't know the issues, and then how to scope projects that can be completed in a short period of time. So the literacy hackathon that we did was 5 hours long. How do you build something in 5 hours? It's very difficult. So we had to find the right tools that would provide shortcuts. And we had to scope projects that would say, just take it a little bit. You don't have to eat the whole elephant, so to speak. So those are the kinds of things that you have to weigh when you're planning a hackathon. But overall, there's enough information out there that these hackathons can happen all the time. They're really, really easy to kind of plan on the surface and plan for all those moving parts, and then just curating the projects.
So when people show up, do you guys sit down and talk about like the overall goal of the hackathon, or just get right away into groups? I mean, how do you get them? You say getting them up to speed on and all of that. How do you do that with a brief, or I mean, how do you do it?
Well, usually we do it online ahead of time, and so we put it right on the website. We say, here's some sample projects. Here are the things that you can do, and we boil it down into marketing speak, because that's what's going to motivate somebody to come. So usually, I'd say about half to 2/3 come with a project in mind, but they might not have a team. So sometimes we help them curate a team. We might do something that we borrowed from Startup Weekend, which is an icebreaker exercise where you have to pitch an idea and people kind of form ad hoc teams. But overall, it's designed to be messy. It's okay to be messy, and it's okay to be ambiguous, and it's okay to show up without an idea. These things tend to sort themselves out in the first half hour, and we just try to approach it person by person.
And that actually brings me to one of my other questions, which is, how do you get the people to come for this thing? So that might bring us back to social media a little bit again, too.
Yeah. Well, I think that when you work with a client like the city of Houston, it's pretty easy because people love Houston. When you work with somebody like the Houston Center for Literacy, and you say, literacy, 1 in 5 Harris County residents is functionally illiterate, and here's what it means. Here's the implications on our workforce, on our schools. It's pretty easy. I think that you have to pick ideas and causes that resonate with people, and then, get the word out. For me, marketing becomes very tactical because I'm working with organizations that are so awesome, and it's just so clear that they're awesome.
I think social media has really helped a lot. I mean, obviously, I know about the City of Houston hackathons because part of the organization putting it on. But for the Houston Center for Literacy hackathon, I went to that one. I learned about it largely because Jeff sent me a Facebook invite, and so I had no idea what the Houston Center for Literacy really did. I mean, I sort of knew it existed, but beyond that, I didn't know much about it. So the idea that there was something out there on social media, there was an event that was telling me about it. The idea that the event mentioned food, and I like food. That helped too.
Yes. Very important.
And this collaborative effort was really only a 6-hour event with the Houston Center for Literacy, and it was really neat. You learned about what this organization was, or I guess is, to use the appropriate tense, what it does in the community, how it benefits the community, and you got to learn about some of the challenges that it faces and some of the challenges that the community faces when it comes to literacy. And then we got to take those ideas that they presented and actually do something with it. And I know the winning project was headed up by Ben and a couple other folks. And so it was really neat. It was a really simple idea. Just map out where our literacy providers are and show the regions. Is it the Houston region? Is it another region of Texas? And so it was a really simplistic idea from an end user that they just didn't have the technical know-how to how to structure the data and how to actually put a map out there. And it was something that the community was able to come together and help solve, and they're able to provide better services to their users. And their users are people that need to learn how to read, or English as a second language type of individuals, or citizens that face a disability, a learning disability, that have to learn about how to read or write in a different way from the rest of us. So it was a really interesting and I guess inspirational event as well.
Actually, you're bringing up something that I think we need to touch on, and we've said it several times, the winning team, the winning team, the winning team. So can you explain this winning thing?
Well, usually we have a panel of judges, usually subject matter experts, usually SMEs, and they're able to really determine what's of high value to the organization. I think that provides just a little structure around the event. We didn't have winners for the write-a-thon, and people came up to me afterwards and they said, man, it would have been great if I had seen what other people were working on. And I did a recap blog, but it's just not the same. So at the end of a hackathon, it's nice to be able to have a few minutes to present your idea, and then for us, or for the hackathons that I'm involved in planning, I tend to try and be creative with the prizes. It's easy to say, oh, you get a $100 gift card, or you get this software package, or this swag from this donor. It's not as easy to say you get to pitch this idea to the mayor, in her office or in her senior staff room. It's not as easy to say, you get to take a tour of the 311 division and understand how these service requests come in. And by the way, if you have an opportunity to tour 311, it's awesome. It's the greatest customer service center I've ever seen.
Maybe we can do a social media Houston breakfast tour. Just saying.
So I think being creative with the prizes and understanding how the participants are motivated. $100 prize isn't going to do anything for me, but being able to meet the mayor, that's awesome. That's so cool. Like, that's such a different motivator. So I would really think about the types of people who are coming to your hackathon, and if you want to make it competitive, make it fun competitive. Don't make it asshole competitive.
Can you define that last one?
So Ben and I put on a softball game every year called Startup Softball, and the only rule is no assholes allowed. We try and get people to forget the score. We try to get people to have a good time. It's family friendly. You know the difference between somebody who likes to play a game and somebody who needs to win the game. The goal is to set up the rules of the event and the culture of the event such that people are motivated by friendliness, but they're not motivated to, elbow people out of the way. And I think that in Houston we strike a really nice balance for that, and that's part of what makes all of these events so successful, is that people are there to meet other people, they're there to collaborate. If they win, awesome. If they don't, that's okay too.
So we're kind of coming up, about 15 after the hour, so I just want to make sure I have open time for questions. Do you guys have any questions about like how these events work or something that you think of? Yes, Carl?
How can I figure out where these things are happening? How can I get involved?
Oh, yes. Well, we'll do that, yeah. But how do you get involved? There's a lot of people here that would be really good at this.
Sure. That's a great question. This transcends different topics and causes and things, so this is more like a tactic in your marketing toolkit. For open government, we have a community group that Frank is a part of and I'm a part of called Open Houston. They kind of help put on the hackathon, the city hackathons, and there's a meetup group, and you can also go to ohouston.org. That's the letter O, houston.org, to see what's going on there. That's a meetup group of about 500 people, and we have civic hack nights, we have guest lectures, we do fun stuff if you're kind of a government nerd and a tech nerd. But I would also say that the best way to get involved is to take the causes that you're already involved in, the things you already care about, and introduce this idea. Normalize the word hackathon. Make it so that people know what it is intuitively, rather than saying, wait, they're going to break into my systems, or they're going to build me a new website, or, really get the word out there, because this is much bigger than just the city. This is just a new way of collaborating.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you guys for doing this, and for the main thing I think that you haven't touched on that I'm so grateful for is that these hackathons and these events provide access not only to the government officials but to the city as a community, and it's so empowering. It's exciting. And again, thank you, and as a filmmaker, as somebody who doesn't exactly fit the typical mold of somebody attending a hackathon, this has been a wonderful opportunity to really expand my knowledge base, but again, it is empowering. It's a wonderful thing. You keep on doing it.
So yeah, there was this. I mean, I agree with you completely. So she said that this gives people an opportunity to have access to these different organizations, including the government in this case,
and the community.
And the community.
We are empowered as a city community advocating changes.
Great.
You talked about working across organizational silos or making presentations at the end of the project. What work do you do in advance to lay the groundwork for acceptance of the results? I mean, what if you do all this work together a project and you're nowhere?
Yeah, what groundwork do you lay out ahead of time to get acceptance by the organization of these goals? Projects.
You've got a lot of stakeholders who might not necessarily be engaged in that event.
Right. So they're the stakeholders that you have to get to afterwards. I think in the city that's probably a huge deal.
So I'm known as a very frank individual. I had to try to follow up Jeff's tweetable quote about the assholes. To be frank, though, I mean that is I think that's a struggle that we face as an organization. We're still trying to figure out that nut. But the approach that we've taken is you fight the battles that you can win, right? So in advance of the first hackathon, for instance, my boss at the time, Bruce, spent a lot of time already working the connections that he had in other organizations. And I think our division is relatively unique in that we're a strategic division that's usually in the mayor's office. And so we work across departments. We're one of the few divisions that does that outside of the mayor's office. And because of that, we have a lot of different contacts in different departments. And so we spent several months before the first hackathon just meeting with different business owners and business stakeholders, asking, what are the problems that you face from a process perspective and from a technology perspective? What are the issues that you face? Are there any particular projects that you'd be interested in tackling? Keep in mind, this is an 18-hour event. You know, you're not going to get a polished gem that's going to look like something from a company that will provide you $1 million contract, you know, type of deal. But it's going to be something that you can potentially move forward with and potentially use to solve your problem. And we got a lot of feedback. We got about 20 some odd projects from that. And we asked them to come out to the event and be those business analysts or those subject matter experts and guide the team towards actually coming up with a pilot project that they could present at the end of this hackathon and move forward with. With the business owners being at the hackathon, you really have the two major benefits. One, they're actually looking at the project, they're actually invested, they're actually understanding what's going on. And two, when that project ends, they know what went into it, and they're going to have an incentive to move it forward. So sometimes there's some departments that we just haven't been able to convince to take part of. Houston PD, I'm going to go ahead and call them out, right? You know, it's tough. It's tough. Not going to lie. You know, but others we've had some pretty good success. Department of Neighborhoods has been a very great partner on this, and we've been able to move 2 projects on Monday that are going to be presented to the mayor. And so it's been an interesting perspective from that sense. I think the other thing to keep in mind is you have to have a change agent that is leading the overall event. Someone that is going to take ownership of the event, take ownership of the results, and bring those results back to the business owners and back to your executives and say, this is what the results were, this is what the business owners are aware of, this is what the business owners are willing to take part of, or anything else as executives that you want to take ownership of. And if so, let me know how you want us to own this. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to move forward without your support. And so that's really what it is. I mean, you can have all the policies and procedures in the world around these events, but if you don't have the person that's going to take ownership of the event to actually take ownership, then it's not going to move forward.
Yes, to the back. Yes.
So I've been actually working with Frank and I go over ranking and finance person. One of the things that people in my circle constantly tell me about hackathons is it's so much data. I don't understand these data sets. I don't understand what they need. They're overwhelming. So I think one that I think at least about the Houston hackathon that we do is people from the department that have created the data sets, Frank and our boss Jesse. They were there to walk around and say, do you need help to understand the data set? We can explain to you where it came from and explain to you what it is. And I think that's such an important part for the person who's actually coding it to understand what the data is, where did it come from, what does it mean. And I think that's a big part of what makes a hackathon successful.
So I'm gonna repeat what you said because for the people online, but basically, and over here too, who may not have heard you. No, it's okay. That it's important to have the people at the event who can answer the questions about the data sets, if you have data sets, or at least that have some authority, I think, is part of what she's saying.
And that came up during the hackathons a great deal, and it's really been an interesting thing for us. I think one of the great examples is 311. We have an issue right now where we have the 301 tickets that come in, and they go out to all these different systems that the departments own. And so just because that system that the department owns sends back a signal to 311 that says, hey, this ticket is now closed, doesn't mean the problem was actually solved. And so to be able to communicate that to the citizen and say, hey, our 301 data set, just because it says the issue is closed, it doesn't mean we patched your pothole. Now, how do we tell you that the pothole is closed? Well, that's another problem that we face, and maybe that's a future hackathon project. But we were there to be able to explain that data, and otherwise that citizen would have not known that. They would have thought, hey, the city's patching all these potholes. And it's sort of a similar thing that a conversation, a good 45-minute conversation I had with someone at the first hackathon about our water and sewer lines. We actually put out a map, and this was already available. We just put it in a centralized place. We put out several maps actually of our infrastructure. These are where our sewer lines are. These are where our water lines are running. the non-secret ones that we don't have to disclose, but the ones that are normal, we put on out there. And we got the questions of, well, can you tell us how much water this person at this address is using? And it's like, well, I mean, we certainly could, but by law we're not allowed to. Federal law prohibits us from telling you that. And so there's definitely interest in that type of data, but being able to tell you why it's not out there is also another benefit that we've had. And so they're able to think about the challenges that they would face if they want to use the data set as well, by being able to ask us questions about what we had released versus what we did not release.
You just ask them back, would you want them to know how much water you used? You had a question? Yeah.
I'm just curious, because I know, I mean, the city's kind of taken a big lead and done a lot of this. Has anybody from the county approached y'all, or have, I mean, they've got interesting data too.
So we're gonna ask about the county now. We're gonna start a war between the city and the county. Go, speak carefully, Frank.
I think we have some good collaborative efforts in different divisions and organizations in the city with the county. Same time, there's always tensions, right? They have a different mission, they have a different customer than we do. I think where we've had the most cross-collaboration are in those efforts that preceded our open data initiatives, and that is in particular GIS, which is the mapping and the visualization of geospatial data. And the county in particular has several different departments or different organizations that are putting out GIS data. There haven't been any efforts to create a centralized location per se, as hey, here's all of the Houston Metropolitan Regional GIS data, or here's that's available already. What we've tried to do instead, though, is as we've learned about that data and as we thought it would be useful for people that would attend our events, we've put it on our open data portal, directly linked back to the data source. So for instance, the Harris County Assessment District, they put out a lot of mapping and a lot of data around parcels and around tax values and around the jurisdictions, what the jurisdictions look like. We put out our own jurisdiction map, what the city of Houston looks like, but we don't know what the city of Bel Air looks like. So we use their data as part of our open data set. It would definitely be interesting to move further down that road of more collaboration, but this program is still in its infancy. There are other regions in the country that have done that. Denver comes to mind, and I think some of the areas around San Francisco as well. But still in our infancy, it's definitely something that we would like to move forward to. And if you have contacts in the county, definitely encourage them.
And from our perspective, we've had two kind of primary interactions with the county in civic innovation. One is with the county library's makerspaces. They're pretty far along in developing makerspaces at their libraries, and they have maker-focused programming. So the things that we do with Houston Public Library, to that regard, we also share with the county library. And then on the other side, we've also had some very preliminary discussions around data and open data and how it relates to criminal justice, because the district attorney's office is operated out of the county. And so we personally, January advisors, are very interested in how we can use data to reform criminal justice and to make it so that we have better policing, better prosecution, better defense, you name it. I think that there's a whole world out there that needs more data-driven decision-making, and these are the first steps.
This is great. Yes, sir.
Two questions for Frank. First, I'm interested in the description that was distributed about your role in the city. Can you talk a little bit more generally about your effectiveness analysis and how to make government maybe more effective, et cetera? And then second, along with that, give us some idea about what actually happened during your budget boot camp educational process for city council.
So the two questions were about budget boot camp, and the other one was about your effectiveness. You can kind of go into that. Frank's effectiveness. We would like your evaluation now.
So our division is called performance improvement. We've existed for just under 3 years. We're housed in the finance department. Traditionally, in other cities, you would see this organization housed in the mayor's office or in council administrative office. We started right after the budget cuts a couple years ago, where we laid off 770 some odd employees. And at that time, there was a abstract survey from the legal department with input from the union saying there was $1 billion in accounts receivable outstanding owed to the city. And so the mayor said that's not acceptable. Let's see if that number is real, and let's see what we can collect on it. And so that was really our division's first taste at this idea. We were brought in to figure out, is this money real? Can we collect on it? And can we help stop layoffs? That's really what it is. And so it's this idea of, can we collect money that is owed to the city more effectively? And so we got our start there. We very quickly realized, well, there's not only places where we cite people. For instance, if you get a parking ticket, we want you to pay it, right? Or if you know, we give you a nuisance citation, we want you to pay it, or we want you to fix the nuisance. But we also realized there were issues around permitting. Most people, you know, if they know about a permit, they're going to go get it. However, a lot of people don't know about permits. They don't know which permits they need to do different things. You know, if you're a business, there's a lot of permits that you need. And that process is pretty complex. And so that was one of the next projects that we sort of begun to work on, this idea of how can we make some of the permitting processes a little bit easier. There were some departments that we were able to get access to and work with, other departments that we weren't. I think one of the most effective things that may seem small that we were able to do is get rid of this idea, get rid of an affidavit that was required for most commercial business permits. If you needed to get an affidavit, we would, if you didn't have it signed and notarized, we would just send back your permit application with your check. Well, that's not very effective. Costs us more money to mail things back to you. And it makes you frustrated as a citizen as well. So we got rid of that, and surprisingly a long battle, because we had to change to the ordinance. From there, we started looking at this idea of, well, we actually do know there are a lot of processes in the city that have the opportunity to be improved. That don't necessarily need technology to improve them, but rather just need to be reorganized. You know, throughout the years and throughout the decades, some processes, for the lack of a better word, have adopted cover your ass policies, right? And when something goes wrong every 100-year flood, you know, to use the term lightly, you know, something goes wrong, and we develop something that has to be done every single time. Well, that's not necessarily the best approach, it's not the most effective approach. So we've developed a Lean Six Sigma training course. We've sent over 800 and some odd employees through it at this point in time in the city of Houston. And we have looked at several different processes, and business owners have looked at several different processes, and we've begun to improve them. I think our most valuable example is commercial permitting. We've gone from a point where it used to take over 90 days on average to get an alcohol permit when you already had your state inspection, to we can turn around the same day and grant you an alcohol permit if you meet all the requirements. I think that's a big victory. One of the other areas in commercial permitting is taxi cab permitting. Putting aside all of the debate about Uber and Lyft and all those other guys, before all that happened, we used to have an employee during taxi cab season, which was about 2 to 3 months, that would spend over 50 hours walking between her office and the taxi cabs to get the inspection stickers. Well, it's because we had a procedure that required the inspection stickers to be locked up. And so we've changed some of those processes as well. So we're not wasting as much time walking back and forth, and we're actually able to get those cabs inspected, and we're not wasting money on overtime while those commercial permitters are having to work overtime to get those taxi cabs inspected and permitted. So 2 big victories there. Are there areas where we haven't succeeded? Yes. Not gonna lie, right? We wish we could have done more with some other permitting processes regarding household permitting, when you have to actually build something. We had some initial attempts at the Mylar walkthrough. That's basically where you bring your blueprint in, and they turn it into this gigantic Mylar printout, and then it gets reviewed by a whole bunch of different divisions of Public Works. We had some process improvements around there, but we like to do more because that's really one of the most interactive places where citizens interact with the city beyond Houston PD. They interact with Public Works to build a house or to renovate a house or to do plumbing. The second question beyond effectiveness was budget boot camp. Yeah. So really quickly, we presented to council members during a budget and fiscal affairs session. We've also presented it to individual council members and their staff on an individual basis, ad hoc. We'll be presenting it to some interns for a staff member next week again. So it's really a re-education effort each and every year. And there's been some success. They're actually able to see it visually as opposed to an 800-page budget book. So I think that's the biggest benefit there. You're actually able to see a graph. You're able to see a chart of where the city's operational dollars are going versus having to understand this 800-page book.
That's great. And I'm going to have this one last question because we're out of time. But, yeah.
There's an important difference that I noticed between hackathons or weekend-long events and hacker spaces, which have the same community, but it's more permanent. What I noticed is that hackathons have been more successful at producing something tangible in a shorter amount of time. And also, they've been better at getting people to collaborate on a single project, whereas in hackerspaces, people are siloed in their independent projects. So I was wondering what's been successful in hackathons at fostering that collaboration and tangible response, and how maybe that can be translated to a hackerspace for a longer term project.
So the question was, for those who didn't hear it, there's a difference between something called a hackathon, where you get together a very, very short period of time for a very focused reason. And what he was saying is he's noticed that a lot of more outcomes seem to come out of that, or at least ones that you know about. And then there's hacker spaces, which is basically like workspaces, where people come and they work on their own stuff. And then, he was asking, how can you bring the hackathon spirit, I think this is it, into the hacker spaces?
That's a great question. I think that it reaches different kinds of people too. People go to hacker spaces because a lot of hacker spaces are like a clubhouse or a place where it's a safe zone. Yeah. Whereas people go to hackathons to actually do something. I would say that the best thing that a hackerspace can do, I think of a place like TXRX, which opens its doors every Friday and Sunday and makes it social. I think that there's opportunities for events and programming for hackerspaces all the time. I think that mainly though, hackerspaces have emerged and created their own kinds of cultures that are slightly different than the people who are just kind of dipping their toes in the water by going to an event. The people at hackerspaces are fully committed. They're swimming around in the deep end. They're just like, I'm doing my thing here. So I think that it's really important for hackerspaces in particular to try to reach out to the community more and try to broaden its doors. I think some of the best ways it can do that are through STEM education events and lectures and things like that.
Yeah, because you were talking earlier about that focus and how important it is to have a focus that isn't about the organization whenever you have a hackathon. So it seems to me that whenever you're in a hacker space, you have a goal that is very much focused on the organization, or in that case, not the organization, but the project, right? And in this case, a lot of people are coming together to solve literacy problems rather than coming together to support the Houston literacy program or whatever, right? Okay. So can you say one more thing about that?
Sure. Well, I think that was well said. Yeah.
All right, he left it to me. All right, great. So we're at the end, guys. This has been a really, really interesting, intellectually interesting program. Thank you guys for sharing your thoughts with us today. Give them a hand. Thanks for Frank. Also, just so you know, in December, we do have our own personal hackathon here, in a sense. We do the gift of guidance every year. We bring in nonprofits and we work with them. We've worked with some of them in the room that are still here and came to us that way and stayed with us, which I'm really happy with. And maybe with this, we've learned a few things. Maybe we'll do some new stuff. But if you're interested in being a part of that program, I'm actually recruiting right now to get ready for that, because we're going to have to start finding nonprofits pretty soon here. I mean, I can't believe I know it's July, but December will be here before we know it. So if you are interested, please come to me afterwards, and we will maybe step this up a notch this year. Maybe you can help me do that.
I love that.
Yeah, all right, see, I'm recruiting you
Yeah,
right now.
no.
Is that okay? All right, great. All right, great. Also, is there any jobs that are available in the room today? Yes, you can hit the in button, ma'am. Yeah. So I know you people in Google Plus, you have to come to the event to get the job. Sorry.